Hello again, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we are going to be talking about the DigiQuatics time clock. So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh Duffy. I'm the co-founder and CEO over here at DigiQuatics, along with Michael Pierce is going to be here as well, answering some questions during today's webinar. So I am going to open up the Q&A and the chat. So if at any point during this webinar you have any questions and it makes sense to answer it along the way, feel free to drop it into the Q&A. And if I need to, I will wait until the end. But you can also drop a quick line into the chat. Let us know where you are tuning in from today. Over there in the Zoom webinar chat, there's just a little icon there. Let everybody know where you're joining us from. I know we have a lot of people who are interested in learning more about DigiQuatics that maybe don't know a ton about it yet. And then we've also got a bunch of very well seasoned DigiQuatics users as well, just trying to learn a couple new tips and tricks, maybe looking to add on the time clock module to their existing account. So I'm really excited to walk you guys through how the time clock works today. So to get things started, I'm actually going to do a screen share here in just a second. Alrighty. Perfect. So we should have the DigiQuatics app up on the screen share here. If you can't see it, just let me know. But basically what we're going to do, just as a quick outline, is we're going to talk about some different settings and configuration options that you have with the time clock. And then I'm going to show you a few different ways that you as an employee can clock in and clock out, what capabilities you have as an admin to clock in and clock out employees on their behalf. Then we're going to kind of go through some different options with like a workstation using the Timeclock Portal. So no login needed, but I'm going to show you how people can clock in and clock out potentially on a tablet or something similar to that. And then what I'm going to do is show you how to export your time clock records for payroll purposes. So let's just jump right into it. The first thing that we're going to do, so when you log into your DigiQuatics account, you're always going to see the dashboard here. So to get to the time clock settings, you're going to go ahead and click on the gear icon in the upper right-hand corner. And then one of the kind of fundamental pieces, I'll go through this a little bit quickly, but under locations, pools, slides, and groups, one of the things that you'll need to do initially if you don't have an account yet is to set up your different locations. And usually these are more like given by like an actual street address. But as you can see here in this account, a lot of people use different departments as different locations. And the reason for that is so that you can do separate schedules and you can also have kind of separate time clock records. So Bikini Bottom Aquatic Center, this is in on one street address. Black Rock Community Center, the aquatics department, so to speak, is at a different location. And then I'm going to also, just for example purposes, have a Black Rock Community Center front desk location. So lots of different possibilities. If you're looking to use a time clock not only in aquatics but in other departments, you're always welcome to do that as well. So these are kind of the three locations that we're going to be looking at. So you'll need to set those up. You'll also want to put in your address, and then we will actually look up the GPS coordinates of that address for you. So I'm going to actually click on location pin not exact. And the reason why is sometimes the GPS coordinates don't necessarily match up exactly with the location that you're at. So sometimes it'll put it way out on the street and maybe your facility is set back from the street a little bit. And so you can actually, we'll get it pretty close, but you can just move this pin to where your facility is exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. One little note here is you can actually change the GPS sensitivity. So if you don't have the greatest connection in your area, you can decrease the sensitivity for the GPS a little bit. Of course, it really depends on the cell signal and the GPS signals in that area as far as how accurate the time clock GPS, the geolocations are. So that's something we can't control 100%, but we can get it close most of the time. So locations is one thing that you're going to need to set up. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat here or to the Q&A section of the webinar here. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is actually go to the time clock portion of the DigiQuatics settings. So if you're not using this module, it'll probably show up as module disabled right here. If you want to turn it on and take a look around, you can go ahead and just click edit here and enable the time clock module. Then moving on to the actual settings for the time clock itself. So use GPS location for clocking in and out. That is a yes or no option. So just depending on how you want to keep track of time clock records, you can turn that on or leave it off. Next is require shift to clock in. Right now I have this as a no, and with the DigiQuatics scheduling, the time clock actually integrates with the scheduling. So what this option means is that, let's say that I am going to try and clock in here, it's 11:07 Mountain Time. So if I was to clock in right now and this require shift to clock in option was on, I would actually have to have a scheduled shift right now, plus or minus a little window, which I'll explain in a minute, in order to clock in. Otherwise, it won't let me clock in. So that's what require shift to clock in means. Clock in rounding interval. So what this means is that you can actually, I'm going to click edit on these settings here. So you can actually change the rounding intervals for the clock in and the clock out time. So you can either leave it as its actual time, round to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. And what this does is this actually works in conjunction with the rounding direction. So on this right now I have none. You can actually say round to the closest interval, round up, or round down. So for the sake of the example, right now it's 11:08 a.m. Mountain Time. So if I say clock in rounding for 5 minutes and rounding direction is up, it's going to round my clock in to 11:10. If I were to say round to the nearest, or the round to 15 and round to the closest interval, we would get 11:15. If it was round down, we would get 11 o'clock on the dot. Okay, so allow clock in X minutes before a shift starts. So same thing here. I'm going to say that I had a shift from 11 a.m. today till 3 p.m. So what this means is that 10 minutes before the start of that shift, of course, you have to be using the scheduling. Otherwise, we don't know when you're actually scheduled to work. This means that starting at 10:50 a.m., I can clock in. Before 10:50, so if I try to clock in at 10:40, it's not going to let me clock in until 10:50. Now, it's 11:09 a.m. I'm actually 9 minutes late for my shift. I can still clock in. It's just preventing me from clocking in earlier than I should. So I hope that makes sense. Basically, these settings are duplicated and customizable for the clock out times as well. So, you know, it's really up to you as to how you want to do this. But if you want to say clock out is to round down to the 10 minutes, you're more than welcome to do that for your clock out there. And then allow clock out until X minutes after a shift ends. So same example, I'm working in a lifeguard shift from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. today. This is going to allow me to clock out until 3:20. Otherwise, it's going to require manager approval to override it and actually clock me out there. So you've got a little bit more control over when your staff are clocking in and clocking out so that they're not racking up quarter hours, 10 minutes, 5 minutes here and there, which eventually adds up to many hours and many dollars. Generate separate standard and overtime hours on grouped exports. I will show you what exactly this means later on in the webinar, but essentially what this does is that over 40 hours in a calendar week, which you can choose how that is configured, this will actually separate. So it'll say this was your standard time totals and this was your overtime totals. And that's on a per employee basis. Include signature line 1 on grouped export. So we have a couple signature lines. There's actually 2 of them. So you can choose to include this or not. A lot of times, people have an employee signature and a manager signature, but you could change this to say, city manager or, HR manager or, whatever you want. And that is, on signature lines when it says, name, title, date, this is just what shows up beneath the line there. So lots of function or lots of customizability available for you there. There's also some affirmation text. So you can also customize this. A lot of HR departments require specific things to be on their timesheets. So you can say, by signing, I certify that these hours are accurate, right? Whatever you want it to be, you can customize that as well. The last option here is that you can automatically clock out your staff that are still clocked in at a certain time every day. So if your facility closes at 9 p.m., you might choose something like 9:30 p.m. just so that you don't automatically clock people out early if they had to stay a little bit late to do some extra cleanup or something like that. So if you want to clock them out at midnight, because your pool usually closes at 11 p.m. or something like that, you're more than welcome to do that. But this just prevents clock-ins from running forever in case somebody forgets to clock in. So any questions so far? Feel free to drop them into the Q&A here. Just looking over to make sure I haven't missed any questions. All right, perfect. So just to recap, here's all of our time clock settings. Now there's also a Timeclock Portal link, which I will come back to here as well. Hourly rate advanced options. So essentially what goes on here is that for each of your, actually, let me just show you. For each of your employees, you can set default pay rates. So I'm going to jump back to this setting, sorry. So in the settings, I have an aquatics coordinator position or job title, MOD, lifeguard, front desk, head guard, lifeguard, etc. You can set a default hourly rate for each of these positions, and you can customize them and add as many as you want, depending on what you need. So for the MOD position, right now I just have a default hourly rate of $11. This doesn't make sense. Let's fix this. We have $13 an hour for the MOD, $12 an hour for the lifeguard. So I'm going to go to an employee settings, and you can use this default pay rate when you assign them the position, or you can create your own. So Joseph Duffy, I am going to create some position access on his employee profile here. So add and edit positions. I'm going to add a position. I'm going to do MOD at an hourly rate of 13. He has some more experience, so I'm going to say this is 13.5. Go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to add the lifeguard position, or lifeguard position. $12 an hour, we'll do $12.25. So you can use the default, or you can set your own on a per employee basis. Okay, so back to what I was talking about in the settings. Essentially what this means is that now that I've assigned those positions to Joe Duffy, if I had forgotten to do that and Joe had already clocked in, it wouldn't know what pay rate to put on those time clock records because there wasn't a pay rate before. And so now when I added them, a lot of times what happens is you have some time clocks that don't have any dollar value associated with them, and now you want to add those in. So basically this hourly rate advanced options just goes back and it just reassigns the hourly rates and the dollar amounts to the previous time clocks that didn't have one. The reason why we did this was because when a time clock is created right now, we take the current hourly rate and do the calculations so that, let's say that that employee gets a pay raise in 3 months from now, all of their time clocks from when they got the pay raise moving forward will be at their new hourly rate, and the existing time clocks will be at the previous pay rate. So it doesn't apply across the board to everything. So anyway, that is how the settings are configured. So let's jump into what exactly does the time clock look like for an employee. So when they log in using their email and password for DigiQuatics, they will see the time clock widget here on the dashboard. And it's going to say clock in. So I am going to click clock in here. It is going to acquire my GPS coordinates. So this is my current location. And Kings Park Rec Center. So I'm actually going to go to Black Rock Community Center front desk. This is where I am actually trying to clock into right now. So for the location and the position, this is going to list all of the locations and the positions that I currently have access to. So essentially, you can't clock in for a head guard shift if you don't have the head guard position on your profile, just as an example. You can't clock in at Bikini Bottom Aquatic Center if you don't have access to Bikini Bottom Aquatic Center. So let me reload this real quick. So Kings Park Rec Center, let me see if this will update now. Might have a slow connection because of this webinar. All right, anyway, so I'm gonna clock in, no shift selected. There we go. Okay, so it says you are not scheduled for any shifts today. Manual time clock entries will be flagged. So again, in the settings, I had the require shift to clock in option turned off. So it'll still let me clock in even though I'm not scheduled, which is just something that you can change. The location notes, so this is again customizable. So we just have some notes here for Kings Park Rec Center, the gate code 7832. So that's another thing that, if you want to include the notes for the location for the employee, they can see that there as well. So I can clock in on all these different positions that I have access to. The employee can leave notes here. So sorry, I was late. They put a reason or whatever, but this also will say you are not within range of this location. This time clock will be flagged. So this just means that there's a little flag for the supervisor to go back and verify this because I'm not actually within the radius of the facility that I'm trying to clock into. So I'm going to clock in, and then now my time clock is going to ask me if I want to clock out. So basically just, standard punch in and punch out. So let's say a little bit of time has passed. I'm going to clock out at the end of my shift. This is actually going to give me a running total of the hours worked. So right now I've worked, 0 hours so far. So I can just click clock out, and then it's going to record with the rounding interval. So again, on the rounding, right? So it'll actually record that I clocked out at 11:18 a.m. But then if I have the rounding options, it'll do the calculation based on the rounding times. But in the audit history, it'll actually tell me what time I actually clocked in. So I'm going to jump over to the time clocks page for the admin view. So I went to scheduling and then down to time clock. So right now I'm looking at this current week. I don't have a lot of data in here, but this is the time clock that I just clocked in. So I'm logged in as Josh Duffy from DigiQuatics at Kings Park Rec Center with the position of MOD2. This is today, February 12th, and I clocked in at 11:17 a.m. And then right now it says I'm still clocked in. So I can see that here, there's no clock out time. And then a couple things here. So I left that note that said, sorry, I was late. So this little icon is the note. The calendar icon means that there's no shift associated with this time clock. And then the little pin here, the pink pin, says this employee has a flagged clock in or out location. And that was because I'm not within the radius of the address that I'm currently at. So I'm going to backdate this time here as a manager to 5:17 a.m. and I'm going to save this. So now when I go back to the dashboard and I try to clock out, I'm just kind of like finagling things a little bit just so you can see what happens after time passes. So I have worked 6.03 hours. I'm still not within range of this location, but I'm going to clock out anyway. Of course, I can't change the location and position because that's locked once I clocked in. All right. So now I've clocked out, I worked 6.03 hours, and now I can clock in for another shift at a different location or different position and go from there. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of how this integrates with the schedule, I'm going to assign myself a shift. So I'm on employee mode of the scheduling. I'm going to add a shift for today at 11:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. for the aquatics coordinator position. I'm going to publish this shift so that I can actually clock in for that. So now I'm going to go back over to the settings. Under time clock, I'm going to say require shift to clock in is going to be a yes. Going to save this. And then I'm actually going to update the address for Kings Park Rec Center to be my own so that we can see the radius. Perfect. Save that. And then the GPS, I just want to make sure that the pin is actually, this is not in the right location. So it hasn't gotten the new address. So the pin should be way over by my house, but the address is good. So let's see here. There we go. Maps, maps, maps. There we go. Perfect. Save that. Okay. Now I'm going to clock in. All right, so here's my shift, 11:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Kings Park Rec Center, Aquatics Coordinator. This is the only shift that I have assigned to myself today. So this is the only option that I have to choose. I can't clock in for another shift at 3 p.m. unless a manager assigns me another shift starting at 3 p.m. So I can't manually change the location and position because this is the shift that I'm clocking in for. So this is how you clock in with the GPS radius here. So I'm going to clock in. Everything should be good here. And then I'm actually going to go back to the time clock so that you can see how this looks for a manager view. So I'm going to click View on this time clock. And this is actually going to show me a complete history of everything that happened. So time clock created on February 12th, 11:23 a.m. Start time, 11:23, position and location. And this map is actually going to use all the geolocation data to actually show me where that person physically was when they clocked in. So this is the pin for the Kings Park Rec Center. Of course, this is my office right now. And then the other pin here is the actual clock in location. So this blue circle is the radius. If you change the sensitivity, the radius, it increases or decreases in size depending on what you're trying to do. So that is how that works. Can you leave a note when you clock out? Also left early due to weather. Brian, to answer your question, answer live here. So the notes are, there's just one field for notes on the time clock. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard. When I click clock out here, yes, you can enter notes here. So if, let me do this one more time. So I'm going to clock out. I'm going to clock in. We'll just say no notes, right? Clock in. And then when I go back to clock out, I can change these notes. Left early due to weather. Clock out, just as an example. So Brian, does that answer your question? As to whether or not you can leave a note. Basically, there's just one notes field. There isn't a separate notes field for the clock in and a separate note and another notes field for the clock out, but you can edit the existing one either way. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Brian. So that is how you clock in and clock out. So again, back over to the manager view, I've actually kind of acquired a couple little time clock records here and there with some different flags based on the location and not having the shift. But the one that I just did that I created a shift for, you can see here that there's no calendar icon because I have a shift, and there's also no pin icon because I have the location inside the radius that is allowed. Okay, so I'm going to show you now how the actual time clock portal works. So right now to access what I've shown you, you have to be logged in with an email and a password. Right now, my employee ID on my profile, I'll show you this super quick. So if you go to Josh from DigiQuatics, on the employee's profile, you can actually enter in a unique employee ID for each employee. So mine is 1234. I'm going to change it to employee ID. We'll do 7777. Easy one to remember. So is 1234, but I just want to make sure this one is unique. So you'll go to the settings under the time clock. We're going to scroll down, and then this is a unique link for your account only. So I'm going to open this in an incognito window in Chrome so that it doesn't recognize us as being logged in. And this is what we're going to see is just the Timeclock portal. My account name is DigiQuatics. So like if you work for Carbon Valley Rec District, you're going to see Carbon Valley Recreation District show up here instead. So then what you're going to do is actually all you need to do is enter in your employee ID here. So I'm going to enter in my employee ID, look me up. It's going to say, oh, I found Josh Duffy from DigiQuatics. Please put in your login info here. So which location are you at, which position, and then you can clock in here. So that's a very simple way to have a bunch of employees as they're coming into the guard room, quickly clock in, and then on their way out, they just put in their employee ID, look me up, and clock out. Simple as that. So you can bookmark this link on a tablet or iPod Touch or a smartphone or whatever, a workstation, so that's really easy for your staff to come in and clock out without having to enter in their entire email and password and go through that process. It's just a whole lot more streamlined. So that is what the Timeclock portal is. So I'm going to jump back over here to the DigiQuatics account, and now I can actually see I clocked in and out so fast it was 0 hours. But this was the one that I did from the Timeclock portal here. As far as everything goes with the audit history, so there was no GPS data on this one. The Timeclock portal does not acquire GPS because there isn't an actual logged in user. It's just inputting the data, just so you know. But if you have it on like a physical workstation in your pool area or in a guard office or something like that, then you know that that person is actually on site. So this is the entire audit history. I'm going to edit one of these time clock records here as an admin just so that you can see how this kind of works. So I know this conflicts with another time clock record that I put in, so I have this little warning here, but I'm going to save this anyway, just to show you that when you view and you look at the history here, this takes a complete snapshot of everything that's been done to this time clock record. So if anybody changed times, if they clocked in late and then backdated it or something like that, you can actually see each step of the way who did what and at what time. So I just updated this manually, 11:28 a.m. I changed the start time to 6:27 a.m. So lots of ways to have good accountability and make sure that everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to. A couple other things here. So you can filter just the flag time clock so that you can resolve those as needed. You can filter the date range however you'd like. So if you want to look at a 2-week timesheet period, you're more than welcome to expand this date range. You can group all of your time clocks by location and by position. So if you want to look at all of your time clock records for one of your many locations, this actually filters the employees that have access to this location. So you're probably confused on why Kings Park Rec Center shows up here. It's because Josh is an employee at Bikini Bottom Aquatic Center. So you can look at all of your locations at once. You can look at just one. You can filter by position. So if you want to filter down to your MOD, employees, you can do that as well. Another thing you can do is you can look at the currently clocked in employees. So this is one way to verify that all your staff are actually at, where they're supposed to be. So you can look at all locations, all positions currently clocked in, and then be able to quickly see on one page, I have one employee at each of my facilities here as well. Robin says, is there any way to set an in-service time and add a list of employees instead of putting in each employee to have a shift at the same time? So Robin, this question is a little bit more related to scheduling, but I'll go ahead and answer it anyway. So there isn't a way to quickly assign multiple people to one shift, but the easiest way to do that is to go over to shift mode. You could create a whole bunch of copies for the shift. So if you go to repeat and duplicate, however many people you think might sign up for the in-service, you'll want to do, let's say like 15, and we'll do this on a Saturday and say the in-service is from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. You want to leave, you can, depending on how you pay them, you can either set the position as lifeguard or you could create a different position for in-service specifically. And then you'll want to go ahead and save this. It'll create a bunch of shifts. This looks pretty big, you know, right now, but then once you assign each employee, especially if they're signing up for multiple in-services, another way to do this is to create these as open shifts and then have them sign up for each one of those. And then it'll automatically go to their schedule when you approve it. So I hope that answers that question for you. Getting back to the time clock though, the last piece here is how to actually export this for payroll. So you'll see here there is a export button and you can do ungrouped or you can do grouped by employee. What those mean is that ungrouped is more of a data dump of all of your time clock records. So essentially what this is going to do, I just have a snapshot of this to save time, is you'll get an Excel spreadsheet with the first name, last name, employee ID, location, position. You can see all the titles here. But this is just one raw data dump of all of the time clocks based on your filters. So if you filter it down to one location, you'll only get the time clocks in here with that location. If you bring it to everything, you'll get everything. So you basically have all this raw data, right? Start time, end time, how many hours, what the hourly rate was, gross pay, shift notes, etc. So that is what the ungrouped export looks like. And then of course you can do your own analytics and reports and whatever from there based on that. The other option here is what we call grouped export. What this is more of a employee timesheet type layout. So you can see here in this Excel export that I have here, whoa, got big. In this Excel export, I have multiple tabs. So tab 1 is for Gabe, tab 2 is for Josh, tab 3 is for Kirsten. And so you get everything, everybody's employees in one XLS file, but each tab is a different employee. So if you want to print them out and have them sign them, it's easy to do that because each sheet will go on its own piece of paper when you print them. The other thing that this does is, depending on your start date and end date, this will break out calendar weeks for you. So back over here in the time clock, you just pick the date. So no matter if you're bi-weekly or you do the 1st through the 15th and then 16th through the end of the month or something like that, it doesn't really matter. All you have to do is pick those times and then run the report. And I didn't mention this earlier, but you can set the starting day of your week to be, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. So this, I don't know why this keeps zooming in. This will actually, This will actually break out the calendar weeks for you. So you can see here, this was back in August. So this first week starting Sunday, August 26th, if your setting was for Monday, it would say Monday, August 27th, and so on. It lists all of the time clocks. It'll do all the hours and rounding based on your settings. It'll break out subtotals for you by position. So if you have like a lifeguard total, you can actually see this in the second week. So we have a pool manager position that's separate. Then it'll do a subtotal for all of your hours in that time period, the date and time, the date range that you filled out. So I have 20.13 lifeguard hours, 7.14 pool manager hours for a grand total of 27.27. Obviously, there's no rounding settings applied for this account here. So basically, whatever payroll system you're using, one of the questions might be if you can do payroll in DigiQuatics. The answer is not right now. So you can type these numbers or do whatever you need to in ADP, QuickBooks, your own timekeeping system, whatever you have. All these numbers are available to you. Here's those areas that you can customize. So the employee signature, the manager signature, and then that affirmation text are going to show up here. So that is what the grouped export looks like. And unless there's any other specific questions, that kind of wraps up the entirety of how the DigiQuatics time clock works. Trying to think if there's anything else that I have missed. Another little quick resource for you, if you go to help.digiquatics.com, you can actually search for lots of different things. So we have a whole bunch of articles here. So clocking in and out using the portal, how to set up your time clock, how to export time clock records. So I will paste a link to this in the chat here. Perfect. And there's lots of links here to the other articles as well. We wanted to make it quite a bit more bite size. So chat. Here we go. All right. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. I'll wait another 15 or 20 seconds to see if any other questions trickle in before we wrap this guy up. So let me see here. I think that is everything. Again, I'm really excited to just get to know you guys more. We're actually going to be at the AOAP conference and trade show here coming up in a couple weeks in Frisco, Texas. So if you're going to be there, we look forward to seeing you guys there. Stop by our booth for a fun treat. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out in the chat on DigiQuatics, even if you don't have an account yet. If you want to set up a more customized demo or a trial account of DigiQuatics, I'll paste the links to that as well. So DigiQuatics.com. If you want to set up a trial, here is the link for that. If you would like to request a customized quote for your organization, here is the link to that. So thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks.